The golden light of late afternoon settled gently over Spirit Haven Ranch, painting the endless fields in warm hues of amber and rust. A breeze stirred the tall grass, whispering through wild flowers that bowed like worshippers before the setting sun. The land stretched open and wide, miles of fences enclosing not just a home for horses, but a sanctuary for the broken, the healing, the wild. To most outsiders, it was just a ranch. But to those who had seen what lived behind the eyes of a traumatized horse, to those who had once wandered, lost themselves, it was sacred ground. A sleek, obsidian-colored Mustang stood atop a gentle rise in the pasture. His name was Spirit, and he looked like he had galloped straight out of a legend. His coat shimmered in the light, his black mane trailing in the wind like smoke from a distant fire. He was the unspoken heart of Spirit Haven, the symbol of everything this place stood for: survival, dignity, redemption. And a man watched him from the other side of the fence, quiet and still. Frank Rojas stood with his weathered hands gripping the top rail, his dark eyes scanning Spirit's form as the stallion cantered in smooth, powerful strides. Frank's face, lined by years of sun and sorrow, softened whenever he looked at that horse. "You still don't know what you saved, do you?" he murmured under his breath. Frank had once lived for roaring crowds and the thrill of the rodeo circuit, riding bulls and broncos with the kind of reckless joy that only comes from youth and grief. He'd chased danger, defied odds, and bathed in the fleeting glow of fame. But it wasn't until after Elena died, his wife, his partner, the dreamer with wild curls and a gentler soul than his, that he'd found true purpose. They were supposed to build this place together. She'd spoken about it in quiet moments. A sanctuary, not a ranch. A home for the broken. For the animals no one wanted. For the wild souls no one could tame. But cancer came faster than their plans. Frank held her hand as the light dimmed from her eyes and made her one promise: "I'll make it. And I'll make it mean something." He'd kept that promise. After the funeral, he sold his belt buckles, his trophy saddles, even his old truck. Then he went out into the desert where horses were left to die, where bruised bodies and broken spirits roamed like ghosts of freedom. That's where he found Spirit. The stallion had been little more than a skeleton then, ribs showing, legs trembling, his eyes half shut in silent agony. Frank had to sedate him just to bring him in. It took 6 months before Spirit even let Frank touch him without flinching. A year before he would approach without fear. 2 years before he'd whinny when he saw Frank coming. Their bond was slow-cooked in patience and pain. And now, years later, Spirit trotted through those pastures like he'd never been broken at all. But Frank remembered. Every scar, every trembling breath, every night he'd slept in the stall just to prove he wasn't going to leave. Spirit wasn't just a horse. He was a promise kept. He was everything Elena would have believed in. The ranch had grown since those early days. Now it spanned several hundred acres, with 15 horses in rotation, some too old to be rehomed, others too wild. A few lucky ones had found forever homes through their outreach program. Frank kept the worst cases close to him, the ones that flinched at shadows and shook during storms. There were no clocks here, no deadlines. Healing happened at its own pace. Frank's favorite part of the day was this: the quiet. When the sun dipped low and the fields shimmered and the horses moved like brushstrokes against the canvas of the land, it reminded him of what mattered. It reminded him why he'd traded a stadium full of noise for the whisper of a single nicker in the dusk. The gate creaked behind him. Frank turned slightly as Lily stepped into the field. Barefoot in the grass again, he noticed. The 16-year-old had been volunteering for nearly a year now. She was the one who always brought music for the horses, played lullabies during storms, whispered to the foals as if they understood every word. "Junebug let me braid her mane today," Lily said, grinning. Didn't even bite me once." "That's progress," Frank replied with a small smile. She tilted her head, watching Spirit with him. "He's looking good. He always does, when he's happy." "Think he remembers where he came from?" Frank looked at her. "I think he never forgot." The wind shifted then, and Spirit's ears perked up. His head rose, nostrils flaring slightly. Frank noticed the change instantly. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. A low hum echoed in the distance, faint at first, then growing louder, mechanical, aggressive, wrong. Frank's jaw tightened. A motorcycle. Not many people rode up to Spirit Haven unannounced. It wasn't exactly on the beaten path. Those who knew the ranch came in pickup trucks or beat-up farm cars. This sound was out of place. He motioned for Lily to head back toward the barn. She didn't argue. The engine's growl grew louder until dust clouds rose near the fence line. A black motorcycle, all chrome and thunder, tore into view. The rider wore a leather jacket, mirrored sunglasses, and an expression like the world owed him something. Frank didn't move. He watched with quiet steel as the bike came to a hard stop just outside the fence. Dust curled around the wheels as the rider swung one leg over and sauntered forward. Spirit had stopped grazing. He was watching too, his body still, ears twitching. The biker leaned casually against the fence, his smirk stretching like a wound. "Nice place," he said, voice thick with mockery. "Didn't think people still played cowboy." Frank said nothing. The biker's eyes landed on Spirit. "That one yours?" Frank's hand flexed slightly on the rail. "They all are." The biker gave a low whistle. "Damn fine horse. Bet he cost a pretty penny." Frank's silence held like stone. Spirit took a cautious step forward, not because he trusted the man, but because curiosity still lingered stronger than fear. The stallion's large eyes studied the stranger, his body taut, ready. The biker reached out a hand mockingly slow, not to pet, not to admire, just to see what would happen. Frank felt it before it happened. A coiling in the air, a shift in weight, the predator inside the man. Then, thud. The biker's boot swung up and struck Spirit hard in the side. The impact cracked through the quiet like a gunshot. Spirit reared back, stumbling in the dirt, eyes wide with shock and pain. Dust flew as the herd spooked, scattering in every direction. And the biker? He laughed. A cold, hollow sound, with no soul behind it. Frank didn't move. Not yet. He just stared, every muscle in his body locked with restraint. His fingernails dug into the fence post. His breath came slow, deliberate, forced. Because rage wanted to move his body. Grief wanted to scream. But Frank knew better. He watched as the biker turned back toward his motorcycle, laughing like it meant nothing, like he'd just knocked over a trash can instead of wounding a soul. He hadn't seen Frank, but Frank had seen everything. Spirit stood frozen, sides heaving from the sudden pain and shock. His hooves pawed the earth once, twice, as if unsure whether to run or fight, but the herd had already scattered across the field. Dust lingered in the air like smoke from a slow-burning fuse. Frank stepped back from the fence. Not toward the biker. Not yet. He turned and walked with steady steps toward the barn. Every inch of him wanted to charge that man, throw him off his bike, make him understand what it meant to hurt something so pure. But Frank had lived long enough to know that violence might satisfy the moment, but it wouldn't teach the lesson. And this wasn't about punishment. This was about something deeper. Justice, dignity, redemption. Frank entered the cool shadow of the barn and took a long breath. The air smelled of hay, leather, horses, and salt, an old ache rising in his throat. He reached for his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Marco," he said when the young man answered. "I need you at the ranch." There was no hesitation. "Be there in 5. Out in the pasture, Spirit hadn't moved much. The others had begun to return, cautious and alert, casting occasional glances at the fence line where the biker still stood, unaware, or perhaps simply uncaring, that anyone had seen. Spirit's dark eyes were fixed on the man. Pain radiated from his left flank, dull and deep, but it wasn't the pain that made him still. It was the ghost. The old ghost. The one that haunted his dreams, even now, when the world was dark and he heard echoes of shouting metal gates, the sting of a whip. Before Frank. Before grass and sunlight and kind hands. Back then, he had been property. A wild-caught Mustang, broken by force, kept in a pen barely wide enough to turn. There had been others, too, shivering in the dark beside him. He remembered the man with the cold eyes and the thick belt, the one who had laughed when Spirit had stumbled, who kicked when Spirit tried to rise. The same laugh he heard now. It was the same sound. He blinked once and saw a younger version of that face behind mirrored sunglasses. The world tilted slightly. His breath grew shallower. His muscles tensed. But he did not bolt. He did not run. He stood his ground, ears pinned back, fire smouldering beneath the surface. Because now, Spirit knew there was something worth staying for. Frank waited at the barn doors until Marco's truck came barreling down the gravel drive, a cloud of dust rising in its wake. Marco was lean, tall, and strong, with the kind of wiry energy that never stopped moving. He jumped out of the cab before the engine finished humming. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately reading the steel in Frank's expression. Frank pointed toward the field. The biker was now seated on the motorcycle, helmet resting on the gas tank, lighting a cigarette with bored fingers. "That guy," Frank said, voice low, "kicked Spirit." Marco's eyebrows shot up, disbelief hardening into fury. "He what?" Frank held up a hand. "I saw the whole thing. Spirit didn't provoke him. He just walked up, curious." "And he kicked him?" Frank nodded. "And you didn't?" "No," Frank cut in. "Because it's not about me, and this isn't over." Marco exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "So what's the play?" Frank's eyes narrowed. "We make sure he doesn't walk away thinking that was just a moment." The biker finally roared off, dust curling like smoke behind him. Frank stood still as the sound of the engine faded. He walked back into the pasture where Spirit stood, now surrounded by the cautious herd. As Frank approached, Spirit lowered his head and released a low nicker, half-greeting, half-wound. Frank placed a gentle hand on his neck, feeling the tension beneath the muscle. "You held your ground," Frank whispered. "You always do." He examined the spot where the boot had struck. No blood, but the muscle was tight, bruised deep beneath the surface. It would hurt for days, maybe longer. But it wasn't the flesh wound that concerned Frank. It was the return of that old shadow in Spirit's eyes. He turned to Marco, who had followed. "Get the trailer ready," Frank said. "We're going to town." Marco blinked. "Now?" "I need to find out who he is." There was a patch on his vest. "Local biker club." "And then what?" Marco asked. Frank looked towards Spirit, who now stood with quiet dignity among his herd. "Then we make him see what he did." The drive into town was quiet, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle from Spirit shifting in the trailer behind them. Frank's hands remained tight on the wheel. He was remembering Elena again, not her death, but her dreams. She'd once said that horses were better at forgiveness than people. "But they don't forget," she'd added. Neither did he. They reached the small town of Cedar Bend, a cluster of old buildings nestled between dry hills and country roads. Frank parked outside the feed store and stepped inside. The owner, a wide-eyed woman named Joanna, looked up and smiled. "Frank," she greeted, "what brings you in?" He didn't waste time. "There was a biker here earlier today," he said. "Black leather, chrome bike, sticker on the back for the Dust Devils." Her face fell. "Yeah, that sounds like Warren." Frank's expression didn't change. "He kicked my horse." Joanna blinked. "What?" Frank repeated it. Silence hung in the air. "Warren. He's trouble," Joanna admitted. "Always has been. Picks fights, drinks too much, thinks the whole world owes him something." "Where does he go?" Frank asked. She hesitated. "Usually hangs out at Brick's, that biker bar near Route 6. Frank nodded. "Thanks." Brick's was exactly the kind of place that smelled of spilled beer, regret, and old sweat. The sign flickered in half-lit neon, and the gravel parking lot was already filling with bikes by the time Frank and Marco pulled up. "Stay by the truck," Frank told him. "I'll handle this." Marco didn't argue. He just gave him a long look. "You sure?" Frank's gaze was steady. "I'm not here to fight." He stepped through the bar's swinging door like a storm on slow legs. Inside it was dim and loud, classic rock from a jukebox, the scent of fried food and beer heavy in the air. Frank's boots echoed across the floor as he walked. He spotted Warren at the far table, surrounded by 3 other bikers. The same smirk, the same sunglasses, now resting on his head like a crown of arrogance. Warren noticed him, leaned back in his chair, and grinned. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look who decided to follow me." Frank didn't smile. He didn't blink. "You kicked my horse," he said, each word like a nail driven straight. Warren shrugged. "So what? It's just a horse." The bar quieted slightly. A few heads turned. Frank took a step closer. "That horse," he said calmly, "survived things you wouldn't last a day in. He's stronger than you'll ever be." Warren raised an eyebrow. "You want me to apologize or something?" Frank's expression didn't waver. "I want you to understand, because next time it won't be a horse you're facing." There was a long silence. Warren's smirk faltered just a little. Frank turned and walked out. He didn't need to threaten. The truth had already begun to work its way under the man's skin. That night, back at the ranch, Frank stood in the barn brushing Spirit's coat by lantern light. The Mustang leaned into the strokes, slowly beginning to release the tension locked in his body. "You held it together," Frank whispered. "You didn't flinch. You didn't run." Spirit's ears twitched, and he nickered softly. Marco appeared in the doorway. "So, now what?" he asked. Frank didn't stop brushing. "Now we make sure the world sees what happened, and maybe we show him something he's never seen before." "What's that?" Frank looked up. "Compassion." The morning after the confrontation at the bar, the ranch felt different. The birds still sang. The breeze still rustled through the cottonwoods. But beneath it all, there was tension, like something waiting to break the surface. Spirit stood near the fence, quieter than usual. He didn't come when Frank called, not out of defiance, but out of something else. Thought, caution, pain remembered. Frank approached slowly, extending a hand. "It wasn't your fault," he whispered. Spirit didn't shy away, but he didn't lean in either. Frank sighed. "I know. Trust is a house that takes years to build. One kick to shake the foundation." He turned and walked back toward the barn, not forcing the moment. There were things to do. Bigger things now. Frank stood in his office, a modest room at the back of the barn, paper stacked and sunlit through dust-smudged windows. He picked up the receiver of the landline and began dialing. The first call went to Ben Marsh. a former rodeo buddy who now ran an animal rescue out in Wyoming. Ben listened without interruption, then said, "You want me to make noise, don't you?" Frank's answer was calm but direct. "I want people to see what happened. I want this to mean something. I can put together a contact list. Bloggers, influencers, a few folks with real reach. You'll have to provide visuals." "I've got a camera on the front gate," Frank said. It caught everything. The second call was to Sheriff Elaine Porter, a woman Frank had known for years. "He hurt Spirit," Frank told her after recounting the event. "And I don't mean just a bruise. I mean something deeper." There was a pause. Then the sheriff's voice came through, low and steady. "We can't charge him unless he trespassed or there's a report of injury. You know the law's tricky on animal cases, especially if no one else saw it." "I know," Frank said. "But I thought you should hear it from me before it hits the internet." Elaine exhaled. "Just keep me in the loop." He promised he would. At lunchtime, Frank found Lily in the feed room, organizing scoops and laughing quietly as one of the foals nosed her hoodie pocket in search of treats. "I need a favor," Frank said. She turned, curious. "What kind?" "I have security footage I need edited. A clean, clear version with context. Then we post it." She blinked. "You mean post it like online?" He nodded. "This isn't just about Spirit. This is about every animal that's ever been kicked, shoved, starved, or forgotten. If I just confront the guy again, it's a moment. If we tell the story right, it becomes a message." Lily stepped forward, suddenly serious. "Let me help." They spent hours that afternoon in the loft above the barn, where Lily had set up a second-hand laptop and editing software. Frank brought in the raw footage, grainy black-and-white clips from the front gate's camera. The moment played out on the screen. The biker coasting to a stop, walking to the fence, Spirit approaching slowly. Then the kick. The horse's body jolted. The laughter. It was hard to watch, even knowing what was coming. Lily turned down the volume and sat back in her chair, blinking fast. "People need to see this," she said quietly. Frank nodded. She began piecing it together, cutting the moment with slow fades and interspersing still shots of Spirit, galloping in the pasture, nuzzling foals, dozing in the sun. Frank recorded a short voiceover, his words measured and low. "This is Spirit, a survivor, a symbol of everything we protect. What happened to him wasn't just cruelty, it was cowardice. But we won't answer it with anger. We'll answer it with truth." They posted the video on social media that evening, on the ranch's modest Facebook page, and then Lily's TikTok, and then Frank's old rodeo forum. By morning, it had over 200,000 views. By afternoon, it was trending locally. The calls started first. A reporter from the Cedar Bend Gazette, then a radio station, then a wildlife podcast. By the end of the day, the regional affiliate for a national news network had left a message asking if they could come to the ranch for a segment. Frank agreed. The day they arrived, the pasture had been freshly raked, the horses brushed, but nothing had been staged. Spirit stood tall beneath the wide sky, and Frank spoke with quiet strength into the camera. "We're not looking for revenge. We're looking for change. These animals have no voice, so we speak for them. And when someone tries to silence that voice, we don't whisper. We rise." The crew filmed Spirit walking beside Frank, watched as the horses gathered near the fence. It was gentle, moving, authentic. The video aired that night, and within 24 hours, it had spread everywhere. People began leaving messages on the ranch's website. Volunteers offered to donate. Animal rights organizations asked if they could share the footage. And while the world watched with fury and compassion, one man sat alone in a dark apartment, watching the same video play out on a cracked cell phone screen. "Warren?" He stared at the image of himself laughing. Then at the Mustang's flinch. Then at Frank's words. "He's not just a horse. He's a survivor." Warren's jaw tightened. He didn't like the way it made him feel. Because somewhere, in a place he'd buried long ago, he remembered something. He had been 12. His father had just left. His mother worked nights and slept through the day. And someone gave him a dog. A mutt named Ranger. Wild and needy and loyal. Too much energy for a boy who didn't know how to love anything. Ranger had chewed the furniture, scratched doors, jumped on people. Warren had tried to train him. But one day, angry and alone, Warren had kicked the dog across the kitchen floor. The sound Ranger made haunted him. The next day, Ranger was gone. His mother said the dog had run away. Warren always suspected she'd given him away instead. He hadn't thought about that dog in years. But now, watching Spirit stumble on the screen, the guilt cracked open like an old scar reopening. Frank was in the barn late that night when the call came. It was Sheriff Porter. "I pulled Warren over for reckless driving," she said. "He looked like hell. Didn't fight me, didn't argue, just sat there." Frank waited. "I showed him the video," she continued. "He didn't say much, but I think he felt it." Frank said nothing. "Anyway," the sheriff added, "he's on your land in that footage. Technically, that gives you some weight. You want to press charges?" Frank took a long breath. "No," he said. "Not yet. Bring him to the ranch tomorrow. I want him to see something first." The sheriff's truck kicked up dust as it pulled into the gravel drive of Spirit Haven Ranch, sun hanging high in the sky. Frank stood waiting outside the barn, arms crossed loosely over his chest, hat low against the light. The wind tugged at his sleeves, but his expression remained calm, unreadable. The truck came to a stop. In the back seat sat Warren, slouched and unsmiling, sunglasses off for once, his eyes ringed with shadows that hadn't been there before. His arrogance had slipped, not completely, but enough that the tension in his jaw now looked more like defense than dominance. The driver's door creaked open and Sheriff Porter stepped out, adjusting her belt. "He's all yours," she said, "within reason." Frank nodded. "Thank you, Elena." She tilted her head slightly. "Don't do anything stupid, Frank." "I'm not the one who did." She gave a tight smile and walked around to open the passenger door. Warren stepped out slowly. The moment his boots hit the dirt, he hesitated. The ranch spread out in front of him, rolling fields, pastures, weathered fences, and an open sky so wide it made him feel small. A place that seemed almost too quiet. Spirit stood in the distance, grazing with his head lowered. He didn't look up yet, but he felt the arrival. Frank could see it in the way his ears shifted. Warren shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, trying to keep some semblance of control. "So," he muttered, "what now?" Frank nodded toward the pasture. "Walk with me." Warren hesitated, then followed. They walked in silence for a long stretch, boots crunching over gravel, wind whispering through the grass. A few horses lifted their heads as the pair passed, watching with dark, intelligent eyes. Eventually, Frank broke the silence. "Do you know why you're here?" Warren scoffed, low and half-hearted. "You mean besides the video that turned me into a national punching bag? You kicked a living being. That's not just a bad look," Frank said, voice even. "That's a window into who you are." Warren flinched slightly at the words. "Look, it was a dumb move. I wasn't thinking." "That's the problem," Frank said. "You didn't think, and when people stop thinking, others get hurt." They reached the outer fence, where Spirit now stood, looking up at them. His black coat shimmered under the sun, and his eyes, deep, quiet, watching, locked onto Warren. Warren looked away quickly. Frank leaned on the fence. That's Spirit. Warren didn't reply. When I found him, he was barely alive, Frank continued. He'd been abandoned out in the desert. No water, no food, just bones and eyes. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded photo. He handed it to Warren. The image showed a different horse, skeletal, gaunt, with sunken cheeks and cracked hooves, but the eyes were the same. Warren stared at it. Frank pointed to Spirit in the field. That's what he became. Not through force, through patience, through care. Warren slowly handed the photo back. I didn't know, he said, quieter than before. You didn't ask, Frank replied. That horse trusts people again after everything he's been through, and then you showed him we're still dangerous. Warren didn't respond. His throat moved slightly as he swallowed. Frank turned to him. You can walk away from this right now. Sheriff already said the charges won't stick, or... Warren looked up slowly. You can stay, Frank said. Work. Learn. Earn the right to be here. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But you'll know what it means to take care of something other than yourself. Warren blinked. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance, Frank said. Which is more than Spirit got. Warren opened his mouth, probably to argue or joke or throw up a wall of bravado, but no words came out. Or, Frank added, you can explain it to a judge. Your choice. For a long moment, Warren just stood there. Then he sighed and nodded. Fine. I'll do it. Frank didn't smile. He only nodded once. We start tomorrow. The next morning, the sun had barely crested the horizon when Warren arrived in borrowed work boots and a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big. His walk was stiff. His expression unreadable. His pride hung off him like armor worn too long. It protected nothing now but kept everything distant. Frank met him at the barn doors. No lectures? Warren asked. No time, Frank replied. Grab that pitchfork. He handed Warren the tool and gestured toward the nearest stall. You're mucking the barn today, every stall, before breakfast. Warren grimaced. Seriously? Frank only raised an eyebrow. Warren muttered something under his breath and stepped inside. The smell hit first. Damp hay, manure, the musky scent of animal life. Warren gagged a little but kept moving. The horses watched him. From every stall, eyes followed his movements. Not with fear, but not with trust either. Judgment, curiosity, Spirit was not among them. Frank had made sure of that. Later that afternoon, after hours of hauling, dumping, and brushing straw from his arms, Warren found himself outside again, watching the herd graze in the pasture. His back ached. His arms were jelly, but his mind, it buzzed. Something about being here felt off, unfamiliar, and not in a bad way. Frank approached, with a grooming brush in hand. Time to meet Spirit. Warren froze. Now? Frank held out the brush. He won't hurt you. Warren took it slowly. The walk to Spirit felt longer than the entire morning's work. The Mustang stood still as they approached. Ears forward, gaze locked. He didn't move, but he didn't run either. Frank stayed back, letting Warren step forward alone. You sure? Warren asked, voice tight. He remembers, Frank said, but he also listens. Warren exhaled and stepped forward, the brush trembling in his hand. Spirit didn't flinch, didn't blink, just watched. Warren reached up, slow and deliberate, and began brushing the horse's neck. His strokes were awkward at first, but gradually found rhythm. Spirit lowered his head, eyes softening. And Warren, he felt something in his chest shift. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the start of something. That night, Warren sat alone in the loft above the barn. The horses below shifted and snorted in their stalls, the night breeze fluttering through the slats in the wall. He pulled out an old voice recorder app on his phone. He stared at the screen for a moment, then hit record. Day 1. I mucked crap for 4 hours. Almost threw up twice. Then I brushed the horse I kicked. Didn't kick me back. Just looked at me, like he was trying to figure me out. I think I deserved that look. He stopped the recording and hit save. It felt strange, saying those words out loud. Stranger still to admit them to himself. But somewhere, down in the field, a Mustang slept in the grass beneath the stars, unafraid. And that, Warren realized, meant something. It meant he still had a chance. Day 2 began in silence. Warren woke to the faint sounds of horses breathing, hay rustling, and the low creak of the barn roof expanding under the warming sun. He had slept on a thin cot Frank had set up in the loft. No electricity. No insulation. Just old wood, a scratchy wool blanket, and an unrelenting ache in every muscle he owned. His first thought was, leave. He could slip out before dawn, steal a bike, disappear like he always did. But something held him. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was Spirit's eyes, watching him without fear or hate. Maybe it was the words he'd spoken into the recorder the night before, words that felt heavier than they sounded. Frank appeared at the bottom of the ladder with a thermos of coffee and a new pair of work gloves. You survived, he said. Warren sat up, rubbing his neck. Barely. Frank handed him the gloves. Good. You'll be stronger tomorrow. The days that followed bled together. Mornings started at 4:30 a.m., no exceptions. Feed buckets, hay bales, mucking stalls, refilling water troughs, cleaning tack. There were no shortcuts, no praise, no room for complaints. Frank wasn't cruel, but he didn't coddle either. He expected Warren to observe, learn, and respect every creature under his care. The horses taught their own lessons. There was Junebug, the blind pony who could navigate the barn by scent and memory. Warren had accidentally blocked her usual path on the first day, and she'd reared back in panic. It took 20 minutes for her to calm down, and hours for Warren to forgive himself. Then there was Tess, a mother mare with a newborn foal. She stood watch over her baby with the fierceness of a lioness. Warren made the mistake of entering the stall too quickly and got a mouthful of dust when she shoved him backward with her shoulder. Frank didn't scold. He simply said, "You're not here to conquer them. You're here to understand them." It stung more than a lecture. 1 week in, Warren tried to leave. It was a quiet Tuesday night. The ranch slept beneath a moonless sky. Crickets chirped. The wind murmured. And Warren crept from the loft, bag slung over one shoulder, keys to an old ATV in his hand. He told himself it wasn't failure. It was survival. He wasn't cut out for this. He wasn't meant to change. But when he reached the gate, at the end of the pasture, Spirit was there, standing completely still, like a statue in the moonlight. The Mustang didn't move, didn't whinny, just stared at him. Warren stopped. His grip on the gate loosened. For a long moment, the two just watched each other. And then, Spirit took a single step forward. Not threatening, not scared, just present. Warren dropped the keys. He sat down in the dirt, leaning against the fence, and stayed there until morning. Lily found him the next day, sitting outside Spirit's stall, eyes red from a night with no sleep. "You look like crap," she said. "Thanks." She sat beside him, quiet for a while. Then, "You didn't leave." He shrugged. Didn't feel right. Lily picked at a straw from the floor. I came here after my brother died. He was all I had. Took me 6 months to speak to anyone. First time I talked, it was to Tess. Not a person. A horse. Warren looked at her, surprised. She nodded. They know. They don't talk back, but they listen. That's enough sometimes. He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away either. Warren began recording himself at night. Not just out of habit now, but as a form of therapy. Each night in the barn loft, surrounded by the quiet breathing of horses, he would whisper into the phone. Day 11. I got kicked again. Not by a horse, by my own ego. Frank told me today that I treat the work like it's punishment. Maybe it is, but I'm starting to think maybe I need to be punished. Day 13. Junebug walked up to me today and pressed her head against my chest. It lasted 2 seconds, but I cried afterward. I'm not even sure why. Day 15. I caught Spirit watching me while I cleaned the fence line. I waved at him. He didn't move, but he didn't walk away either. That felt like something. 3 weeks in, Frank gave Warren a task no one else had been allowed to do. Take Spirit for a walk, he said. Past your perimeter. Just once. Warren blinked. Alone? Frank nodded. He won't follow if he doesn't trust you. Warren's hands shook as he fastened the halter. Spirit didn't resist. Step by step, they walked the pasture fence. Quietly, slowly. By the time they returned, Spirit was trailing behind him without a lead rope. Frank said nothing, just handed him an apple and walked away. Warren shared it with Spirit in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Warren's changes weren't just physical. He learned to wake without an alarm, to care for animals before himself, to accept silence as conversation. He started saying good morning to the horses, started checking on Junebug without being told. He even started reading animal behavior books from Frank's office, highlighted and dog-eared. Once, Lily caught him sketching Spirit in a notebook. You're turning into a real softy, she teased. Warren smiled, actually smiled. Don't tell anyone. Frank finally invited Warren to the house. It was simple. Wood floors, old photographs, mismatched chairs. But it radiated warmth. A picture of a woman smiled from the mantel. Her hair curled wild and wind-tossed. Her eyes looked like they knew things. Elena, Frank said, following his gaze. She believed in second chances, for horses, for people. She would have hated me, Warren said. No, Frank replied. She would have made you clean the chicken coop, then offered you lemonade. They shared a rare laugh over dinner, chili, cornbread, and stories Frank hadn't told anyone in years. Warren listened, really listened, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. Week 5 brought the storm. The sky turned charcoal grey. Wind clawed at the trees. Lightning forked above the hills. Frank was in town, picking up medical supplies for one of the older mares. Warren was alone with the ranch hands when the warning came through. Tornado watch, someone called. The horses grew restless. Panic rippled through the herd. A fence collapsed under a falling branch. Warren acted. Not out of fear, but instinct. He rallied the others, herded the horses into the barn, calmed Tess before she trampled her foal. Then he noticed Spirit, missing, out in the open field, pacing, agitated. Warren grabbed a rope and ran. Wind howled. Rain started to fall sideways. He found Spirit at the far edge of the pasture, pacing near the broken gate, eyes wild. Easy, boy, Warren shouted over the wind. I'm here. Spirit turned, ears flat, muscles taut. Warren inched forward, soaked, and trembling. "It's me. I'm not gonna hurt you." Another step, then another. He dropped the rope and extended his hand. "I know what it feels like to be scared, but I won't run. Not this time." Spirit hesitated, then stepped forward. They stood nose to chest as lightning cracked in the sky, and Warren walked him home. Frank returned to find the ranch intact, the barn secured, the horses safe, and Warren asleep in the stall beside Spirit, head resting on hay, arms slung across the Mustang's back like a brother. Frank didn't wake him. He just stood there for a long time, watching. The following morning, the entire ranch knew. Not because Warren bragged, but because Spirit did something no one had ever seen him do. He followed Warren across the pasture, unprompted, nudged him when he paused. And when Warren turned to say goodbye to the gathered ranch hands after a long shift, Spirit stood beside him, still, steady, proud, like an equal. That night, Warren recorded his final entry. Day 35. I found what I didn't know I was looking for. Not forgiveness, not peace, just clarity. I don't hate myself anymore. I don't know if Spirit forgives me. But he trusts me. And maybe that's better. Tomorrow I leave. But I'll never be gone. The morning of his departure, Frank handed Warren a halter. "Last job," he said. "Go bring him in." Warren nodded and walked to the pasture. Spirit waited. No rope needed. No command given. They walked together. Frank watched as Warren brushed Spirit one last time, steady and sure. "You've changed," he said. Warren looked at him, eyes raw but clear. "I didn't think I could." Frank placed a hand on his shoulder. "You chose to." At the farewell gathering, the ranch hands clapped. Lily cried. Marco slapped his back. Frank pulled out a framed photo. Warren, standing beside Spirit in the field, the storm clouds behind them breaking into light. He hung it beside Spirit's original rescue photo in the barn. Beneath it, a wooden sign read, "Every soul deserves a second chance." Warren looked at Spirit one final time. "Thanks," he whispered, pressing his forehead to the Mustang's, "for teaching me what I didn't even know I needed to learn." The day after Warren left, the ranch felt quieter, almost reverent. Lily noticed it first. The horses were calm, but subdued. Spirit lingered near the fence for hours, staring out toward the road as if waiting for someone who might return. Frank didn't say much. He kept himself busy, cleaning the tack room, repairing a broken gate, oiling an old saddle that hadn't been used in years. When Lily brought it up, he only said, "He'll carry this place with him." That's enough. But as the sun rose on the third day without Warren, the sky over Spirit Haven Ranch darkened. Frank had lived on the land long enough to recognize the signs, a stillness in the air, the sudden hush of birdsong, the way the horses paced just a little more restlessly. A storm was coming. Not just a summer thunderstorm. Something worse. By mid-afternoon, the forecast had changed from rain to violent storm system. County officials issued a severe thunderstorm warning, followed by a flash flood advisory. The soil was already saturated from the rains the week before. If the storm hit full force, pastures could turn to rivers in minutes. Frank stood on the barn porch watching clouds build like bruises across the horizon. The wind howled through the trees, and already loose debris scattered across the drive. He turned to Marco and Lily, who were busy prepping emergency feed and supplies. "We move them to the lower barn," Frank said. "Pair them up, Spirit, with Tess. Junebug and the foal with her mother. No one gets left outside." He hated locking the horses in during storms. But this one wasn't about preference. It was about survival. The team moved fast. Practiced from drills, Frank made them run every spring. Horses were ushered gently but quickly into stalls. Storm shutters were dropped over the barn windows. Emergency lanterns were lit, in case the power failed. By the time the first cracks of thunder split the sky, every horse was secured, except one. Spirit. Frank stepped into the pasture, rain already spitting down in cold, stinging bursts. Spirit stood beneath a tree near the west fence, ears pinned back, eyes wide. He was agitated. More than usual. Frank whistled softly, coaxing him toward the gate. "Come on, boy. We've been through worse." But Spirit didn't move. A loud crack of thunder exploded overhead, followed by a whip of wind that snapped branches from the tree above. Spirit reared slightly, his hooves churning the wet earth. Frank took a step forward. And then another voice joined the wind. "Let me try." Frank turned. Warren stood at the edge of the field, soaked through, boots caked in mud, face streaked with water and dirt. Frank stared at him, dumbfounded. "How did you—" "I was halfway to the next town," Warren shouted over the wind. "Heard the storm warning on the radio." I turned around. Frank blinked, just once, then stepped aside. Warren walked toward Spirit. The wind howled louder. Rain fell in sheets now. The ground was slick and soft. Warren approached slowly, hands low, voice low. "Hey, big guy, remember me?" Spirit watched him, tense but rooted. Warren took another step. "I know you hate storms. I get that. I used to hide in the closet when they hit back home, thought the thunder was something coming for me." Spirit flicked his ears. Warren kept talking. "I left because I thought I was done learning. I thought I'd changed enough, but I didn't come back for me." A flash of lightning illuminated them both. Warren mud-streaked and trembling. Spirit, tall and black as the storm behind him. "I came back for you." The Mustang didn't move. Then Warren dropped to his knees in the mud. "Please," he whispered, "let me make this right." A beat passed. Then another. Then Spirit stepped forward and lowered his head. Warren rose slowly, slipping the halter around Spirit's neck, whispering reassurances the whole way. The walk back to the barn was slow, careful. Each step taken in tandem, as if horse and man moved by the same will. Frank held the stall door open when they arrived. Spirit walked in without protest, and Warren followed, brushing the rain from his eyes. "You came back," Frank said simply. Warren nodded. "Yeah, there was no need for more." The barn shuddered as the storm hit in full, wind slamming against the walls, thunder shaking the rafters. But inside, the stalls were warm, safe, still. Warren stayed with Spirit for hours, sitting in the hay beside him, occasionally brushing mud from the Mustang's coat. At one point, Spirit laid down in the straw, not out of fear or pain, but comfort. He trusted Warren now. Truly. When the storm finally passed and morning light filtered through the shutter slats, Frank made coffee on a propane burner and handed Warren a mug. "You didn't have to come back," Frank said. Warren took a sip. "I know, but you did." Warren shrugged. "I guess you were right. Change doesn't stop when you think it does." Frank nodded slowly. "It starts when it hurts the most." They stood in silence for a while, watching Spirit as he slept. Then Frank asked, "So what now?" Warren looked toward the hills, the road beyond them, the open sky. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm not done. I want to do something with this. Teach people. Help animals. Fix what I used to break." Frank didn't respond immediately. Then, "You've earned that chance." The next day, Frank gathered the ranch crew and held a short meeting beneath the cottonwoods. They fixed fences, cleared debris, and checked on each horse. When the work was done, Frank said something that silenced the group. "I think it's time we added a new program. For people, not just horses." Lily smiled. "A second chance program?" Frank nodded. "Exactly that." He turned to Warren. "You'd be the first success story." Warren, for once, had nothing to say. Only a grateful smile. And Spirit, standing tall behind him, nuzzling his shoulder gently, seemed to approve. Spirit Haven Ranch had changed Warren in ways he never expected. He stayed for 3 more weeks after the storm. Not because he had to, but because he wasn't ready to leave, not yet. There was still work to be done, not just with his hands, but in his heart. Something deep inside him had shifted, like tectonic plates grinding against one another, until something entirely new was formed. Each morning, he woke before dawn. He'd throw open the barn doors to greet the golden hush of sunrise stretching over the pasture, and Spirit would already be waiting near the fence, watching, calm, as if they had a silent agreement to begin the day together. Warren no longer needed orders. He knew the rhythm now. He had absorbed the language of the ranch, the shuffling of hooves in the dark, the snort of a mare anticipating breakfast, the creak of old wood settling beneath the weight of history and healing. There were no more words of resentment, no more bitterness clinging to his voice. In its place was gratitude. One evening, Frank invited Warren to share a meal in the house again. This time, Warren didn't hesitate to accept. They ate by the fire, the flickering light casting shadows against the walls that bore framed photos of Spirit, of rescued foals, of Frank and Elena back in the early days, dusty boots, sunburned smiles, and unshakable dreams. Frank poured them both a drink, sweet tea for himself, strong coffee for Warren. "I never asked," Frank said, settling into his chair. "What made you kick him?" Warren was silent for a moment. Then, "I was angry." "At the horse?" "No," Warren admitted, staring into his mug. "At myself. At the world. At how I never got a break. Spirit. He was just there. Calm. Beautiful. Untouched. And I hated him for it." Frank didn't speak. He let the words hang in the air, like truth should. Warren continued. "But now I know. He wasn't untouched. He just healed better than I ever did." Or, Frank said softly, "he had someone who believed he could." Warren nodded. "Like I had you." They sat in silence for a while, not needing anything else. Just the warmth, the fire, and the quiet understanding between two men who had once walked through darkness alone and no longer had to. By the end of the 6th week, it was time. Warren knew it. So did Frank. And somehow, so did Spirit. That morning, Warren found a new pair of boots left for him outside the loft. Sturdy, brown leather, not flashy but well made. Frank's old pair, passed down without fanfare. Beside them was a folded note. "Where you go next, carry what you've learned." Warren folded the note and tucked it in his jacket pocket. It felt heavier than it should, like a compass that didn't point north, but to something even more important, forward. They held a small gathering that evening. Just the ranch hands, Lily, Marco, and Frank. They stood near the paddock as the sun dipped behind the hills and lit the sky in brilliant golds and soft purples. Lily handed Warren a leather-bound journal. "So you can keep recording," she said, "even if it's not out loud." Warren opened it and smiled at the first page. In neat handwriting, Day 36. The journey continues. Marco gave him a one-armed hug. "You're not as big of a jerk as I thought." "Coming from you," Warren grinned. "That's practically a medal." Frank stood beside Spirit, who wore a newly polished halter. The Mustang looked at Warren, with the same quiet certainty he always had, steady, assessing, dignified. Warren approached slowly, then stopped a few feet away. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me." He reached out, and Spirit stepped forward, nuzzling Warren's shoulder in a gesture that carried more weight than words ever could. Frank joined them, holding a framed photo. It showed Warren and Spirit in the storm, mud-soaked, battered, and triumphant. He held it up for everyone to see. "This," Frank said, "is what we stand for. Not perfection, not punishment, but change, redemption. Second chances, not just for horses, but for people too." He pointed to the barn, where two photos now hung side by side. Spirit's emaciated rescue image, and this one. Below them, a new wooden plaque. "Not all scars are visible, but all healing leaves a mark." Warren packed his things the next morning. Simple items. The journal, Frank's note, a photo Lily had taken of him brushing Junebug, a pocket knife Marco had engraved with the ranch's initials, and the leather cord from Spirit's halter, tied gently into a loop. He lingered at the barn one last time. He touched the gate, the old work gloves, the soft brush still carrying Spirit's hair. Frank found him there, as expected. "You ready?" he asked. Warren nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Frank didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. He just said, "Go, make it count." Warren walked to the fence where Spirit waited. No halter this time, no lead. He rested his hand on the stallion's neck, and for a moment they stood like they had on the day of the storm, bound not by fear or force, but by trust. "Take care of him," Warren said. Spirit whinnied softly as if answering, "And you." Warren climbed into the truck he'd been fixing up over the last few weeks. An old Ford, now reliable and ready for a new chapter. As he started the engine, the ranch crew waved. Lily wiped her eyes. Marco gave him a thumbs up. Frank simply nodded, his hands in his pockets, hat tipped low. Warren drove down the long dirt road, heart heavy but sure. He looked in the rearview mirror one last time and saw Spirit, black against the setting sun, watching him go. A sentinel. A friend. A video began circulating on social media. A group of young men in an urban neighborhood stood in front of a rundown stable, trying to calm a frightened horse rescued from an illegal racing ring. One of them, tattooed, calm, confident, walked forward and spoke to the horse like it was the only living soul in the world. The caption read, "From biker to barn whisperer, Warren changed his life at Spirit Haven Ranch. Now he's changing others. Second chances, horses heal too." Frank watched the video from his phone, standing at the same fence where he'd first seen Warren arrive months ago. Spirit stood beside him, calm, quiet. Frank smiled. "He's making it count." The Mustang whinnied, flicking his ears, and together they turned back toward the field, toward another day of healing and another soul that might yet be saved. The dust hadn't even settled on the back roads behind Spirit Haven Ranch when Warren felt the weight of the next chapter pressing against his chest, not heavy with dread, but with purpose. As the ranch faded from view in his rearview mirror, Spirit's gaze still lingered in his mind. That steady, unwavering look that had seen through him from the beginning. Warren didn't know exactly where he was going, but he knew what he was chasing. Not escape, not redemption, something more. He drove until the hills gave way to warehouses and railroad tracks, and the horizon was a jagged line of city rooftops. He stopped on the outskirts of a place that didn't appear on brochures, where graffiti bled through brick walls, chain-link fences curled at the edges, and the air was thick with both noise and need. Here, people didn't talk about healing, but Warren was done waiting for the right setting. He would bring the healing with him. The place was a run-down equestrian yard wedged between a scrapyard and a freight depot. 3 acres of uneven pasture, 2 rusted barns, and one crumbling stable with barely enough light to see your own breath inside. But Warren saw more than the rust. He saw a beginning. He leased the land with the little money he had left and called in a few favors. One came from a rancher Frank knew in Texas, who offered a donation of old fencing and supplies. Another came from an outreach coordinator who had seen Warren's viral transformation story and wanted to help him get started. A week later, Warren hung a crooked, hand-painted sign above the barn entrance. Second stride, a place to start again. The first horse he rescued came from a man who ran illegal races in a neighboring town. The horse was thin, skittish, and covered in sores. Her back was bowed, her legs unsteady. Warren named her Chance, because that was all he had to give her. The first night he sat in the stall with her, he whispered, "I'm not here to fix you, just to show you it's safe to stand." Chance didn't come near, but she didn't turn away either. The word spread slowly. At first, it was just two neighborhood kids who wandered past the fence and asked if they could feed the horses. Then it was a teacher from the local high school who asked if her students, those falling behind or on probation, could volunteer. By the third week, Warren had 8 teens mucking stalls, painting fences, and learning how to read a horse's body language. None of them had ever touched a horse before. Most of them didn't trust anything that wasn't fast or loud. But horses don't shout to be heard. They whisper. And one by one, the kids began to listen. Warren didn't try to be a savior. He gave them work, boundaries, and time. He shared just enough of his story to let them know he understood the look in their eyes, the mix of defiance and fear, of walls built from years of silence and shame. He told them about spirit, but only in fragments. The day the horse didn't flinch, the storm, the way healing sometimes looked like a scar. One of the boys, a wiry 15-year-old named Mason, said, "You ever hit one? Before?" Warren looked him in the eye. "Yeah, once." "What happened?" "I changed," Warren said, "and he let me." That was all Mason needed. Chance made slow progress. She still flinched at sudden movements, still needed coaxing to step into the paddock. But when Mason entered the barn one morning, he found her waiting at the stall door, ears perked. He called for Warren, who came running. Together they stepped into the stall, and for the first time, Chance let someone lay a hand on her neck without backing away. Mason's voice cracked. "She doesn't hate me." "She never did," Warren replied. "She just didn't know how to be safe." But not everyone was supportive. A few locals raised eyebrows. Some old acquaintances of Warren's from his biker days started whispering that his transformation was a PR stunt, a way to avoid jail time, a mask. Warren ignored most of it. But one night, as he closed up the barn, he found the sign out front defaced. "Criminals can't change," scrawled in red spray paint across the wood. It stung more than he admitted. He repainted the sign the next morning. But the doubt lingered like smoke. A few days later, as he patched the paddock gate, a familiar voice called out from the fence line. "Looks like you're playing cowboy for real?" Warren turned, and his chest tightened. It was Tony, his former friend from the Dust Devils Biker Club. Leather jacket, toothpick between his teeth, that same crooked grin that used to signal trouble before it arrived. "You here to watch, or throw a punch?" Warren asked calmly. "Neither," Tony said. "Just curious. Everyone's talking. Thought I'd see the miracle man for myself." Warren wiped his hands and leaned against the gate. "It's not a miracle. It's work." "Yeah?" Tony smirked. "You look different? But that rage in your eyes? That's still the same." Warren stared at him. "I'm not hiding who I was. I'm trying to do better." Tony laughed. "Better don't change what you did. Doesn't mean I stop trying." Tony shrugged and walked away, tossing a parting shot over his shoulder. "Just don't forget, man. Wolves in sheep's clothing still bite." That night, Warren couldn't sleep. He paced the barn, checked on Chance 3 times, and sat on the back steps, staring at the moon until dawn. He thought about Frank, about Spirit, about the boy he'd been, and the man he was trying to become. He pulled out his journal and wrote, "Day 87. Today someone reminded me of the worst version of myself, and for a second I wondered if they were right. But then I looked at Chance, at Mason, at this place, and I realized every day I wake up and keep choosing differently. I build a version of me that old me wouldn't recognize. Maybe that's the point." 2 days later, a familiar truck pulled into the dirt lot. Warren blinked in disbelief as Lily climbed out, camera bag slung over her shoulder, eyes full of her usual spark. "You didn't think I'd miss your grand comeback, did you?" Warren grinned. "What are you doing here?" "I'm filming a short documentary," she said. "Your story. The kids. Chance. All of it." Warren raised an eyebrow. "Since when are you a filmmaker?" "Since Spirit Haven taught me to follow what matters." Lily spent 3 days at Second Stride, interviewing the teens, filming Chance's progress, capturing Warren in motion, gentle voice, firm guidance. A man who'd once used fists, now using hands to heal. Before she left, she handed him a thumb drive. "For when you forget who you are," she said, "or need to remember who you've become." Warren hugged her. A full, strong hug he would have been too guarded to give a year ago. "Tell Frank I'm still making it count," he whispered. "You just did." A month later, the video aired. It was raw and real. Kids sharing their truths, footage of Warren guiding a trembling Chance into the sunlit pasture, shots of laughter, work, and quiet transformation. It ended with Warren's voice, recorded without his knowledge during an early morning feeding. "I kicked a horse once, and somehow he didn't kick me back. He gave me something better, time, space, forgiveness I hadn't earned yet. That horse saved my life. Now I get to pass it on." The video went viral again. Millions of views in days. But this time, Warren didn't hide from the attention. He used it. Donations came in. Volunteers applied. Animal welfare groups offered partnerships. And best of all, a small group of Mustang rescue advocates reached out with an idea. Rebuild a bridge to Spirit Haven? Warren stood in the barn that night, watching Chance nudge a nervous teen who had once refused to speak. He thought of Spirit, of Frank, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Warren couldn't run from the past forever, not when it started showing up on his doorstep. It happened on a Monday morning, just after feeding. The sky was overcast, heavy with the kind of stillness that warned of storms. Warren was rinsing buckets when the rumble of a motorcycle split the quiet. He paused, shoulders tensing. He knew that sound. Not the make or model, but the energy of it. The sharp punctuation of arrogance. The echo of days long gone when his world was ruled by engine growls, bar fights, and fists. The bike stopped at the edge of the property. Warren turned slowly. Tony. Same worn leather jacket, same toothpick between his teeth, same crooked grin that had once made Warren feel invincible. Now, it just made him tired. Tony killed the engine and dismounted. "Heard you were saving horses and souls out here." Warren wiped his hands on a towel, motioned toward the barn. "Don't come to make trouble." Tony held his hands up. "Easy. Just visiting." "Why?" Tony shrugged. "Curiosity. And maybe a little nostalgia. Saw your face in that video, looking all saintly. Figured I'd see it in person." Warren didn't smile. "What do you want?" Honestly? Tony leaned against the fence. I want to know if it's real. You, playing cowboy, taking care of kids, healing horses. You think you're not one of us anymore? Warren's eyes narrowed. I don't think. I know. Tony tilted his head, smirking. You forget what we've done? No, Warren said. I remember. That's why I left. The grin dropped from Tony's face. For a moment, the only sound was the wind brushing against the trees. You think you're better than us? Tony asked. No, Warren replied, but I'm trying to be better than I was. Tony pushed off the fence. Word is you left a trail. You still got dirt under your nails, brother. Don't act like you've washed it all away. Warren's jaw tightened. If you're here to drag me back, you're wasting your time. Tony leaned closer. What happens when the kids find out who you really are? And with that, he turned, climbed onto his bike, and roared off, leaving behind a dust cloud and an old ache Warren thought he'd buried. That night, Warren couldn't sleep. He sat in the tech room, staring at the same wall he'd hung Frank's note on months ago. The words blurred in the dim lantern light. Where you go next, carry what you've learned. But what if what you carried could bury you? He thought of Mason, of Chance, of the other teens who had begun trusting him with pieces of their pain. He had told them they were more than their pasts. But what would they say if they knew all of his? Not just the horse, not just Spirit, but the fight, the man. The night he didn't stop. It had been 5 years ago. A bar fight gone wrong. A man Warren barely remembered. Angry words, broken glass, fists flying. Warren hadn't started it, but he hadn't walked away either. And the man, he'd hit the floor and didn't get up for a long time. He'd lived, but with broken ribs and a head injury. Warren had left town 2 days later. No charges were ever filed. No police came knocking. But Warren had carried the weight anyway, tucked it into the corners of his soul like a splinter that never healed. Now, Tony had brought it back. The next morning, Mason found Warren sitting on the mounting block outside the arena. You okay? Warren didn't answer right away. He looked at the boy, just 16, but with eyes older than his years. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. I need to tell you something, Warren said finally. All of you. That afternoon, he gathered the kids. They sat on hay bales in the barn. Eyes wide, whispers exchanged. Warren stood in front of them, backlit by the open doors. Chance shifted nearby, as if waiting too. I haven't told you everything about who I was, Warren began. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't know if I deserved the trust you gave me. He looked at Mason. 5 years ago, I got into a fight. I hurt someone. Badly. I didn't mean to, but that doesn't matter. I didn't stop. I was angry, lost. The man lived, but he'll carry that night forever, just like I do. The silence was sharp. One of the girls, Samira, spoke first. Why are you telling us now? Because someone from my past showed up, Warren said, and tried to use it against me. I'd rather you hear it from me. Another boy, Theo, frowned. So, you were violent? Yes, Warren admitted. But I don't want to be any more, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure of that. No one moved. Warren lowered his head. If any of you want to leave, I won't stop you. Then, Mason stood up. Did you own it? Warren looked up. What? The fight, Mason said. You admit it. You didn't blame anyone else. You're not hiding. You're just here. Warren nodded slowly. Mason crossed his arms. Then I think you're exactly who should be helping us. The others murmured, some nodding. Samira added, If you weren't one of us once, you'd never understand what we need. A strange, trembling breath left Warren's chest. It felt like forgiveness. Later, in the quiet, Warren stood with Chance in the round pen. The mare pressed her head into his chest, steady and soft. He whispered, "You ever feel like the past isn't done with you?" Chance didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. That was enough. The next week brought a letter in the mail, from Frank. No return address, just a simple, folded piece of paper and a photo. The photo showed Spirit standing beside a new horse, a foal, young and unsteady, with a white blaze across its nose. Frank's note read, "Some ghosts don't want to hurt us. They want to be seen. Proud of you. Keep riding." Warren stared at the photo for a long time. Then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Chance's breathing was shallow, her body trembling, as Warren knelt beside her in the stall. It had started the night before, a subtle change in her appetite, a little too much standing, too little movement. By dawn, her body was slick with sweat, and her eyes were wide with panic. Colic. Warren recognized the signs from Spirit Haven. But this was worse. Chance went down hard against the side of the stall, grunting from the pain as she rolled, trying to escape the ache in her belly. Warren tried everything he remembered, walking her, rubbing her sides, encouraging her to stand. Nothing worked. And now, she was flat out on her side, twitching, her chest rising in uneven gasps. Warren pressed his forehead to hers, panic blooming in his chest like wildfire. "Stay with me, girl. Please." Mason stood in the doorway, white as a ghost. "Is she gonna make it?" "I don't know." Warren pulled out his phone and dialed a number from the contact list Frank had once given him, a local large animal vet with emergency experience. She answered on the first ring. "I'll be there in 20, the voice said. "Hang in there." True to her word, the vet arrived just as the sun crested the horizon, casting a dull light over the barnyard. She was tall, with sharp cheekbones and a presence that demanded attention even before she said a word. Her name was Dr. Elena Markov, and she moved with the kind of authority that came from a lifetime of walking through barns like these. "Colic," she said, without needing confirmation. She crouched beside Chance and ran her hands over the trembling mare's belly. "She's severely dehydrated. Stomach's distended. She's been holding this longer than you thought." Warren winced. "I should have caught it earlier." "You caught it when it mattered," Elena said, without looking up. "Now help me save her." For the next hour, they worked together in a kind of wordless rhythm. Warren held Chance's head while Elena inserted a stomach tube to relieve the pressure. She administered fluids, pain relief, sedatives. Every so often, she muttered something under her breath. Russian, maybe, soft and steady, as if she were talking to the horse's soul. When it was done, Chance lay breathing quietly, eyes half closed but calmer. Warren collapsed beside her in the straw, drenched in sweat. "She's stable," Elena said. "For now, but keep watch through the day. If her vitals spike, call me." Warren nodded, dazed. "You saved her." Elena offered a small smile. "No, we did." Later that day, as Chance dozed under a blanket of hay and clean air, Elena returned to check in. Warren handed her a cup of bitter coffee. "Thanks again. I owe you." "You owe the horse," she replied. "They're the ones who forgive us before we forgive ourselves." Warren chuckled softly. "You know Frank?" Her expression shifted slightly. "I did. Years ago. His wife, Elena, was my mentor in vet school." Warren blinked. "You knew Elena?" "She taught me that horses heal people as much as people heal horses," Elena said. "Looks like she was right." He studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes. Loss, maybe. Understanding. "Did you ever go to Spirit Haven?" he asked. She nodded. "Once, after Elena passed. Couldn't bring myself to stay long. Too many ghosts. Warren looked at the stall where Chance lay. I know the feeling. Over the next week, Elena visited daily. She checked Chance's vitals, adjusted her feed, walked with Warren around the paddock. Their conversations deepened from logistics to philosophy. Warren found himself talking about spirit, about Frank, about the storm that changed everything. And Elena listened. Not like someone diagnosing a problem, but like someone who had felt pain in similar shapes. I used to think people were the problem, Warren confessed during one of their late-night walks. But it turns out I was just scared they'd never believe I could be more than what I'd been. You don't need everyone to believe, Elena said. Just the ones that matter. They stopped at the fence line, watching Mason brush one of the younger horses. The boy laughed as the mare nuzzled his shoulder. You matter to them, she added. That's clear. Warren felt a lump rise in his throat. He swallowed it back. You've got away with words, she smiled. So do you. You just don't trust them yet. On a breezy Thursday evening, after the last of the kids had gone home, Warren and Elena sat on the back steps of the barn, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs. You ever think about going back to Spirit Haven? She asked. Every day. You miss it? I miss what it gave me, Warren said. Not just Spirit, or Frank. I miss the silence that made me stop running, the horses that didn't care who I'd been, only how I treated them today. Elena looked down at her cup. You built something like that here. Warren shook his head. Not yet, but I'm trying. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a photo. It was of Elena, young, vibrant, standing with Frank beside a foal under a blooming cottonwood. Warren stared at it, awed by the peace in her expression. She believed in starting over, Elena said, even when it hurt. Warren took a deep breath. That foal, is that Spirit? Elena nodded. He handed the photo back with trembling fingers. You ever think horses know when they're meant to find someone? He asked. Elena smiled. I think they know who's meant to heal. Chance made a full recovery. It took time. Daily walks, massages, careful feeding. But eventually her coat regained its shine, her eyes lost their fear, and one day she trotted across the paddock with such strength that the kids whooped and cheered. Mason turned to Warren and said, She's different now. She always was, Warren replied. She just needed time. That night, he sat with Chance under the stars and whispered, You're more than I deserved. But you stayed anyway. Inspired by Chance's recovery and Elena's encouragement, Warren wrote Frank a letter. I used to think Spirit was a miracle, but now I think maybe there are many like him. I think Spirit was the first chapter, but not the whole story. Chance reminded me of that. She didn't kick me. She let me try. That's the second chance I never expected to earn again. He included photos. Chance grazing peacefully, Mason smiling beside her, Elena in the background, hands on her hips. A week later, Frank replied with a short note and a photo. The note read, You gave a horse her name back, and in doing that, you remembered yours. The photo showed the barn wall at Spirit Haven. A new frame had been added. Chance, mid-trot, eyes clear, body strong. Underneath, a simple inscription. Redemption is a name we all carry once we stop hiding from it. Warren hadn't expected the familiar gates of Spirit Haven Ranch to hit him so hard. It had been nearly a year since he first drove down that dirt road, every part of him filled with resistance and rage. But now, as his truck rolled across the gravel and the wooden archway came into view, he felt the tightness of gratitude take hold in his chest. Beside him, in a small horse trailer, was the reason for his visit. A rescued Mustang foal named Ember. She was no more than a year old, with a wild mane and a streak of white down her side like a bolt of lightning. Warren had found her abandoned near a construction site, dehydrated and panicked, running in frantic circles. It took 2 hours, and the quiet presence of Chance, his once fractured mayor-turned-mentor, to calm Ember enough to load her into the trailer. And as Warren looked in the side mirror now, Ember's head peeked out, her ears alert, her body calm. "This is where it all started," he murmured. Frank was already waiting by the barn. His posture hadn't changed, still straight-backed, hands on his belt, eyes squinting into the afternoon sun. But there was something softer in his face now. As Warren parked and stepped out of the truck, Frank met him halfway. No handshakes, just a nod and a faint smile. "You're back?" Warren nodded. "Only for a visit, but, yeah." They stood in silence for a moment, both of them taking in the shared weight of memory. Then Frank glanced at the trailer. "Who's the passenger?" Warren smiled. "Her name's Ember. She was living under a bridge when we found her, malnourished, scared, but she's got fire in her." Frank's gaze softened. They usually do. They brought Ember into an open quarantine paddock near the main barn. Frank inspected her without touching, just watching the way she moved, how she reacted to her surroundings, how her muscles tensed and relaxed with each breath. "She'll do well here," Frank finally said. Warren leaned on the fence, arms folded. "I wanted her to meet Spirit." Frank's brow raised, then he turned slowly and whistled. From the far side of the field, a familiar figure emerged from the trees. Spirit. Still proud, still strong. Older now, his black coat streaked with silver and wisdom. But he moved with the same grace that had captivated Warren the first day he saw him. He trotted to the paddock, paused, then dipped his head slightly toward Ember. And Ember, timid but curious, stepped forward. Their noses met, gently. Then Spirit let out a soft snort and turned, walking along the fence line. Ember followed. Warren exhaled, emotion thick in his throat. "He's still teaching," he said. Frank nodded. "That's what he does." Later, they sat on the porch with coffee, just like old times. The fields stretched before them, golden in the light, the wind teasing the grass into waves. "I've been following your work," Frank said. "Second Stride, Chance, the youth program." Warren gave a shy smile. "It's growing. We have a waiting list now. You're making something that lasts." Warren stared out over the land. "I learned from the best." Frank tilted his head. "You didn't just learn. You lived it." They were quiet again. Then Frank said something that Warren hadn't expected. "I'm thinking of retiring." Warren blinked. "What?" "I've been doing this a long time," Frank said, "and I've been waiting to find someone who could carry it forward, someone who gets it. Not just the work, but the soul of it." Warren sat back. "Are you saying—" Frank turned to him. "I'm saying I've been thinking about what comes next, and I'd like you to consider taking over Spirit Haven someday." The words landed like thunder in Warren's chest. I don't know what to say. Just think about it." Warren looked out at Spirit and Ember, walking side by side in the pasture. Then up at the barn, where photos of second chances lined the walls. "I came here broken," he said quietly. "Now I can build something whole." Frank smiled. "That's all I ever hoped for." That evening, Lily arrived with Marco for a small dinner under the cottonwood trees. Lily tackled Warren with a hug that nearly knocked the wind out of him. "You really came back?" He laughed. "Just try and stop me." Marco gave him a slap on the back. The legend returns. The four of them shared stories and laughter beneath string lights Frank had strung up for Elena years ago. Warren felt the ache of what had been and the peace of what remained. After dessert, they gathered at the barn. Spirit stood calmly at the center, Ember at his side. Frank held up a new frame. "This one's for Ember," he said. "Her photo goes beside Chance's." Warren held the camera and snapped a picture, Spirit, Ember, and Frank in the golden light. Then he took one more. Spirit, looking directly at him. "You still scare me a little," he muttered. Spirit flicked an ear. "I'm taking that as approval." As the stars came out, Warren sat alone in the pasture, watching Ember sleep curled up beside Spirit. The wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Warren pulled out his phone and opened the journal app. Day 360. 1 year since I walked through the gates of Spirit Haven. I came here with nothing but anger and left with something I still don't have a name for. Peace? Purpose? Maybe it doesn't need a name. It just needs to be shared. I don't know if I'll ever feel like I've paid the debt I owe. But maybe that's the wrong way to think about it. Maybe the point isn't to repay it, but to pass it on. Frank wants me to take over someday. That scares the hell out of me. But maybe it should. Big things always do. He looked out across the moonlit fields, where generations of healing had walked before him. Whatever comes next, I know this. I'm ready. Second chances weren't just for the horses anymore. They were for everyone who dared to believe. Warren stood at the edge of Spirit Haven's main pasture, watching a small convoy of vans arrive through the wooden archway that bore the ranch's name. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the fields as a soft wind danced through the trees. Behind him, Spirit lifted his head at the sound of tires crunching gravel. The vans parked in a row, doors opening one by one. Dozens of eyes, nervous, curious, unsure, looked out onto a world they hadn't seen before. They weren't horses. They weren't volunteers. They were youth, just like Warren had once been. Every one of them had come from the Second Stride program. Now, for the first time, they were visiting Spirit Haven Ranch as part of a brand new initiative, a partnership between two sanctuaries founded on the same belief that healing could be shared. Over the past 6 months, Warren had split his time between Spirit Haven and the city property. Ember, now growing strong, had adapted to both places, becoming the bridge between where Warren had been and where he was going. Spirit remained the constant, a steady soul whose presence calmed even the most broken of hearts. Frank had officially handed over day-to-day leadership of Spirit Haven to Warren 2 months earlier. He stayed on the land, but no longer rose at dawn to check water troughs or mend fence rails. Instead, he walked the fields at sunrise and sunset, often with a coffee mug in hand, nodding silently at the life still growing around him. And Warren? He had grown into the role with reverence and resolve. He no longer flinched when called leader. He no longer apologized for his past. Because now, that past gave others permission to rise from their own. Mason stepped out of the lead van, taller now, more confident, but still wearing the same wide-eyed expression when he looked at Spirit. "Is that really him?" he asked. Warren smiled. "That's the one." Mason took a cautious step forward, his hand extended. Spirit lowered his head and touched it. The rest of the group followed, tentative, reverent, silent. These were the kids Warren had once guided through pain and defiance. Some had records. Others had stories no court would ever hear. But here, none of that mattered. They were seen, not judged, welcomed. The next few days unfolded like a living storybook. Workshops in grooming, feeding, basic medical care, horse communication sessions led by Lily, who now managed education outreach full-time, evening bonfires where teens shared pieces of their stories, voice quivering, eyes shining. And at the heart of it all, the horses. Spirit, Ember, Chance, Tess, Junebug, even the oldest, creakiest rescues played their part, standing quietly as trembling hands reached out and touched something alive real, and safe for the first time. One boy, Rhys, barely spoke during his first 2 days, but on the third, he sat in a field with Junebug's head in his lap, tears rolling down his cheeks. "She doesn't care what I did," he whispered. "No," Warren said gently, kneeling beside him. "She only cares that you're here now." Elena came out for a week as part of the summer session. She ran clinics on horse health and nutrition, but mostly she stayed close to Warren. Their bond had deepened, quietly, steadily. It wasn't romantic in the way movies might show it. It was real, rooted, shared in glances, in conversations held while brushing down horses, in shoulders leaning together during long days. She didn't try to fix him, and he didn't try to impress her. Together, they just were. And that, somehow, was more than enough. Frank stood beside Warren at the end of the third week, watching the youth lead horses back into their stalls after evening chores. "You built something I couldn't," Frank said. Warren looked at him. "You built the foundation. I just followed it home." Frank's eyes sparkled with age and pride. "And you gave it wings." The final evening of the session, they held a gathering under the stars. Teens, staff, ranch hands, volunteers, all circled around the campfire. Plates of food in their laps, firelight painting their faces in gold and orange. Warren stepped forward, Ember behind him, Spirit to his right. He cleared his throat. "I kicked a horse once," he said, "and it should have ended there. I should have been done. But he didn't kick me back. He gave me time. He gave me space. And when I came back, he let me in." He looked at the group. "I didn't deserve it. But I learned. I changed. And now it's your turn." He pointed to the fields behind them. "Those horses out there, they don't care what you've done. They care about who you show up as tomorrow. And tomorrow. And the day after that." He took a breath. "Second chances aren't just possible. They're necessary. And you, every single one of you, deserve them." One by one, the teens stood. Some cried, some smiled. And one, a girl named Cleo, whispered, "I believe you." Weeks passed. Photos from the summer session were framed and hung in the barn beside the old ones. Spirit's rescue, Warren in the storm, Chance mid-recovery. The new ones showed Ember and Rhys, Cleo brushing Junebug, Mason leading a trail ride. A new wooden sign was added beneath the others. "Second chances for all." Below it, Frank etched a phrase by hand. Not just a place, a promise. The following spring, Spirit passed quietly in his sleep. Warren found him in the pasture just before sunrise, lying peacefully beneath the cottonwood tree Elena had planted all those years ago. His body was still, but his face was serene, as if the old stallion had simply decided it was time. The ranch mourned. Frank cried silently, hand on Spirit's flank. Lily led a memorial ride across the field. Warren stood before the youth gathered at the ranch that week and said only, "He was the first to believe in me." Then he buried Spirit at the highest point of the pasture, beneath a carved stone that read, "You carried us all." In the years that followed, Second Stride and Spirit Haven became a connected force across the state. More youth, more horses, more second chances. Warren never called himself a hero. He never forgot where he came from. But he became a name, spoken in classrooms, on courthouse benches, in homes where parents whispered, "Maybe this is the place that could help." He didn't preach. He listened. And when someone came to the gates, broken, bruised, and scared, he only asked, "Are you ready to try again?" On the 5th anniversary of Spirit's passing, Warren sat beneath the cottonwood tree with Ember beside him, her coat now dappled with age and wisdom. Across the field, new foals ran. The barn echoed with laughter. Frank sat nearby, cane in hand, eyes closed, breathing in the scent of earth, hay, and redemption. Elena joined them, wrapping a blanket over Warren's shoulders. And Warren opened his journal just one more time. Day 1, 826. The world didn't end when I broke. It began when I bent and let the light in. Spirit was my turning point. Chance was my mirror. Ember is my legacy. We heal in circles, in rides, in stall doors opened, and voices steady. And I've learned this much. Healing doesn't mean erasing what was. It means becoming what still can be. He closed the book, looked out over the land, and smiled.